All right. So the first question is: language is a purely human and non-instinctive method of communicating ideas, emotions, and desires by means of a system of voluntarily produced vocal symbols. Voluntarily produced vocal symbols. Now let's move on to the next question. The next question is: it has two assertions, assertion one and assertion two. The first assertion has for words, a distinction is sometimes made between open class words and closed class words. The second assertion is that words may be classified as content words and function words. Now, I need you to elaborate more on what this really means or signifies. So, the first assertion is that for words, a distinction is sometimes made between open class words and closed class words, right? So, open class words are like, nouns, and closed class words are like pronouns, which do not change regularly, whereas for open class words, they change regularly. The second assertion is that words may be classified as content words and function words. So that is also very true because words may be classified as content words. Content words are like maybe nouns, whereas function words are like uh, you know grammatical function words like is, can,
The
maybe.
distinction between open class words and closed class words relates to how words can be categorized based on their usage and frequency of change in a language. Open class words include parts of speech like nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. These words can easily accept new entries over time. For example, new nouns or verbs can be added to a language as new concepts emerge or as society changes. Closed class words, on the other hand, consist of categories like pronouns, prepositions, and conjunctions. These words are relatively stable and don't frequently change. For instance, the set of pronouns in English, he, she, it, remains constant over time. In the second assertion, content words and function words are another way to classify words. Content words carry the core meaning of a sentence, including nouns, verbs, run, adjectives, happy, and adverbs, quickly. Function words, such as prepositions, in, on, conjunctions, and, but, and articles, the A, help structure sentences and show grammatical relationships between content words. So both distinctions help in understanding how different types of words function and change in language.
Now the next question, it has two assertions. First assertion is formal universals are statements on the form of the rules of grammar. That is very true. Substantive universals are elements in the grammar required for the analysis of the linguistic data. For example, noun phrase, verb phrase. Elaborate in detail. What are substantive universals?
Yes, you've got it. Formal universals refer to general statements about the structure or rules of grammar that apply across different languages. They focus on the abstract rules that govern how sentences are constructed. Substantive universals, on the other hand, are specific elements or categories that are found in the grammar of various languages. For example, noun phrases and verb phrases are substantive universals because they are common grammatical structures used to analyze linguistic data in many languages. So, both assertions are correct. Formal universals deal with the structure of grammar rules, while substantive universals deal with the common elements found in grammatical analysis.
Now, both are true. Now, the next question is in the sentence, John, who is my friend, is a fool. Who here is a relative pronoun. Relative pronoun are used to relate one part of the sentence to the other. For example, John, who is my friend, is a fool. That is what relative pronoun means. Can you briefly elaborate what a relative pronoun is?
A relative pronoun is a word used to connect a clause or phrase to a noun or pronoun. It introduces a relative clause and provides more information about the noun or pronoun it refers to. For example, in John, who is my friend, is a fool, Who is the relative pronoun that introduces the clause, who is my friend, giving more detail about John?
Now, in the sentence, the foolish boy gave the girl an egg. So the girl here is an indirect object. Next question. The boy hit the dog.
Yes, that's correct. In the sentence, the foolish boy gave the girl an egg, the girl is the indirect object because she is the recipient of the egg. The direct object is an egg, which is what is being given.
Now the next question, the boy hit the dog. What the boy here is the agent. What are the other theta roles in this sentence? Can you elaborate, like the dog? What role, what theta role does the dog carry in the sentence? The boy hit the dog. I believe that should be I don't know. The dog should be the one that experiences, but it's not the experiencer. The dog should be something like, I have no idea. It might be no, source is something like he took out the gun from the van. So van is the source here. Instrumental, the key opened the door. The key is the instrumental. The theta role here. Experiencer theta role is something like experiencer. So I saw a dog. So that is an example of experiencer theta role. But what theta role does the dog have in the sentence? The boy hit the dog. Is it patient? I think so.
Yes, you're right. In the sentence, the boy hit the dog is the patient. The patient is the entity that is affected by the action. The boy, being the one performing the action, is the agent. The dog, which is impacted by the action of hitting, is the patient.
Now, the next question, a term in phonology used to describe the loss of distinction between two phonemes in a particular environment is neutralization. The next is code. Code. Poetic function, emphoca. Poetic function, I think, is it talks about the code, because metalingual function is something like, a super, language being used to express language. So that's the metalingual function. Emotive function relates to the one who is expressing something, so it relates to the addresser. Phatic function, where language is used to establish contact, or checking the channel working. So my best guess is poetic function, but you need to elaborate, how does code relate with the poetic function? It's not the poetic function, it's the metalingual function, Manav.
The
Okay.
poetic function of language focuses on the form and aesthetic quality of the message itself, rather than its content.
Hmm.
When we talk about the code in the poetic function, we're referring to the way language is used creatively and artistically to enhance its impact. The structure, rhythm, and style of the language becomes central, with emphasis on how the message is delivered and perceived, rather than just the information it conveys. This contrasts with other functions like the metalingual function, which is about discussing or clarifying the language itself, or the phatic function, which is about ensuring communication channels are open.
So code relates to the metalingual function. Is it correct or incorrect?
Yes, that's correct. The code relates to the metalingual function because it involves using language to discuss or clarify language itself.
Now, the next question is assimilation. Assimilation relates to combinatory phonetics. Next is the concept of national syllabi. This was proposed by D.A. Wilkins. Now, I want you to elaborate what this concept of national syllabi is, and when did D.A. Wilkins propose this, and which work was it proposed? what are its what is its area, concerned area, like what does it majorly talk about?
The concept of national syllabi, proposed by D.A. Wilkins in 1978, focuses on designing language education programs based on the needs and contexts of specific countries or regions. Wilkins argued that language teaching should be tailored to the sociocultural and economic needs of learners, ensuring that the syllabus is relevant and practical for real-world use. His approach emphasized the importance of aligning educational content with the specific linguistic and cultural context of the target audience.
Now D.A. Wilkins, the concept of national syllabi, talked about the teaching should be aligned with the culture of the country. Isn't that correct? Don't make it elaborate, because I don't have time. Just be concise with your explanation.
Yes, that's correct. D.A. Wilkins proposed that language teaching should be aligned with the cultural and practical needs of the country.
Now, the next question is a term to denote the smallest sound units that can be segmented from the acoustic flow of speech and which can function as a semantically distinctive unit is phoneme.
The term is phoneme. Phonemes are the smallest units of sound that can distinguish meaning in a language.
Right, that's understandable. Now, the next question is a term used for referring to a sudden short peak of acoustic energy which occurs in the production of certain sounds is called burst. Now, explain to me what is filter, food, formant. So, formant is basically it is related to acoustic phonetics, wherein it talks about the vowels and their measurement, and formant. So it is divided into two types: F1 and F2. F0 is basically the fundamental frequency. F1 is the rounding of the lips. F2 is the forward or backward positioning of the lips, and F3 is the additional features included in the sound. So, give me a brief detail of all of the terms. Format and what it includes. Filter, burst, foot. Foot is basically, I believe, two syllables coming together. Burst, as this question describes, is a term for referring to a sudden short peak of acoustic energy which occurs in the production of certain sounds. So that's burst. Now, in while explaining burst, you need to really go into it. Exemplify what burst really means, right? It should make me conceptually clear. So you need to provide an explanation which makes things conceptually clear about burst. Also, do the same thing for filter. Now, go ahead and do what I told you to do.
Sure, let's break it down. Formant. In acoustic phonetics, a formant is a peak in the frequency spectrum of a sound, which is particularly important in vowels. Formants are categorized as F1, F2, and F3. F1 relates to the height of the tongue, how open or closed the mouth is. F2 relates to the backness of the tongue, how forward or backward the tongue is. And F3 gives additional features of the vowel sound. These formants help in distinguishing different vowel sounds. Filter. In phonetics, a filter refers to the shape of the vocal tract that modifies the sound produced by the vocal cords. It shapes the resonance of the sound, affecting how different frequencies are amplified or diminished. Think of it like a physical filter that changes the quality of the sound we hear. Burst. A burst is a brief, intense release of energy that occurs when certain speech sounds are produced, like plosives, e.g. P, K. When you say a word with a plosive sound, there's a moment where the built-up pressure is suddenly released, creating a sharp peak of acoustic energy. For example, when saying the word pat, the P sound involves a burst of air being released from the mouth, creating that sudden peak of energy. Foot. This term is used in metrical phonology to describe a unit of rhythm in poetry and language, where a foot consists of a set number of syllables with a specific pattern of stress. For example, in English, a foot could be an I am, an unstressed syllable followed by a stressed syllable, like in the word allow. I hope this clarifies the terms for you.
Yes, it certainly did. But about F0, the format F0, wherein it's the fundamental frequency. So what is that?
The fundamental frequency, often referred to as F0, is the lowest frequency in a sound and represents the basic pitch of the voice. It's essentially the frequency at which the vocal cords vibrate during speech or singing. This fundamental frequency is what we perceive as the pitch of someone's voice. For example, in speech, when someone speaks in a high-pitched voice, their F0 is higher, meaning their vocal cords are vibrating more rapidly. Conversely, a lower-pitched voice has a lower F0 with slower vocal cord vibrations. This fundamental frequency serves as the foundation upon which the other formants, like F1, F2, build the more complex aspects of sound, such as the quality and identity of vowels.
Now, the next question talks about complementary distribution. So, complementary distribution, allophones of a phoneme are in complementary distribution. Two allophones of the same phoneme cannot occur in one same environment. Like, for example, the aspirated p or the aspirated p in in the word pin. So it cannot have the unaspirated p in the same position. But if we talk about the word spin, so here the p, the allophone of the p that is present is the unaspirated p, wherein the aspirated p cannot occur. So this is what is described by complementary distribution. And let's look at this question and the options. So allophones, which are sometimes phones, allophones which never occur in the same phonetic environment, allophones which occur in the same position without causing a change of meaning, allophones which sometimes occur in different phonetic environments but always have the same meaning. So it's the allophones which never occur in the same phonetic environment. Yes, that's correct. Now let's move on to the next question. So the association between the words read, verb past tense, read, and read, the adjective. So the association between these two words, what is this termed as? So this is termed as homophony. Homophony. Okay, elaborate what exactly is homophony and how is it different from homophones?
Homophony occurs when two or more words sound the same, but have different meanings, and often different spellings. For example, read, pronounced as read in the present tense, and read, pronounced as read in the past tense, are homophones. They are spelled the same, but they are pronounced differently depending on the tense, and they have different meanings related to the action of reading. Homophony is different from homography, where words are spelled the same, but may be pronounced differently and have different meanings, like lead, to guide, and lead, a type of metal. It's also distinct from homonymy, where a single word form has multiple unrelated meanings, such as bat, the flying mammal, and bat, the equipment used in sports. The key difference between these concepts lies in the aspects of spelling, pronunciation, and meaning. Homophones focus on the sound similarity between words, regardless of their spelling or meaning.
All right. The next rhyme of a syllable consists of, so there is a rhyme. Rhyme nucleus, coda, onset. I don't remember all of it. So onset and coda. So the rhyme consists of probably the first two, that is nucleus and coda. Coda and nucleus, coda and onset. So onset and coda, I believe rhyme includes onset and coda, whereas coda and the you know the coda and the, yes, nucleus and the coda is called as something else. Let's see. So actually no, nucleus and coda, the last two, nucleus in the between and coda at the right hand side of the nucleus. So when nucleus and coda come together, this forms the rhyme of a syllable. Now tell me, what happens, what is it called when the nucleus and the onset come together?
When the nucleus and the onset of a syllable come together, they form what is referred to as the syllable body, or simply the body of the syllable. The onset is the consonant or consonants that precede the nucleus, while the nucleus is typically the vowel at the core of the syllable. To recap, onset, consonants that come before the nucleus. Nucleus, the vowel or syllabic consonant that forms the core of the syllable. Coda, consonants that follow the nucleus. This consists of the nucleus and the coda together. So when you combine the nucleus with the onset, you're looking at the initial part of the syllable, often called the body.
All right, the next question is the action of glottis determines phonation. Let's move on to the next question.
Yes, that's correct. The action of the glottis, which involves the vocal folds, is referred to as phonation. Phonation is the process of producing vocal sound by the vibration of the vocal folds within the larynx. When air passes through the glottis, the vocal folds can either vibrate to produce voiced sounds, like vowels and some consonants, or remain apart to produce voiceless sounds. This action is essential for speech and is a key component in distinguishing different types of sounds in language.
Now, find the correct order. That's the next question. First is food, then is phone, then is distinctive feature, then is syllable. So we need to arrange this in the correct order. So the first and the smallest is distinctive feature, which is there in the mind, and then is the phone. Phone is actually it exists. Distinctive features are like just features of sounds in the human brain, whereas phones are something, it's a sound that exists, that has its existence. Now then after phone forms the syllables. So phones combine to form syllables and syllables combine to form food. So the correct order is distinctive feature, phone, syllable, food. Am I correct?
Yes, you're correct. The correct order from the smallest unit to the largest is 1. Distinctive feature. These are the smallest units of sound in the mind, representing specific phonetic properties that distinguish one phoneme from another. 2. Phone. A phone is an actual sound produced in speech. It's the physical realization of a phoneme. Syllable. A syllable is a unit of organization for a sequence of speech sounds, typically composed of a vowel sound with or without surrounding consonants. 4. Foot. A foot is a unit of meter in phonology that consists of a combination of syllables, typically one stressed syllable and one or more unstressed syllables. So your order of distinctive feature, phone, syllable, and foot is correct.
Now the next question is the fusion of the sounds the or d and j to produce j is called distance assimilation, coalescent assimilation, progressive assimilation, or regressive assimilation. So the this is termed as coalescent assimilation. Now please go ahead and explain me With example, what coalescent assimilation is. I need to clarify this. I need to get this clarified at the conceptual level so that I never forget it. Go.
Coalescent assimilation occurs when two adjacent sounds merge into a single sound, which is a blend of the original two. A classic example of this is when the sounds D and J combine to form the sound N, like the J in judge. For instance, in the phrase would you, the D in would and the Y sound in you can merge, resulting in a pronunciation like would-ja. Here, the original D and J sounds coalesce into the single T sound. This is different from other types of assimilation because it involves the creation of a completely new sound, rather than just modifying one sound to become more like its neighbor. This process is common in natural speech, especially in casual or rapid speech, where adjacent sounds influence each other and create a blended sound that's easier to pronounce.
Now, the next question is a portmanteau morpheme is a morpheme which is used as a portmanteau morpheme. So, a portmanteau morpheme, I believe, is basically something which has more than one meanings. For example, the word you, it has the meaning of the second person, like you go to home, and the second person plural, that is, you all go to home.
A portmanteau morpheme is indeed a morpheme that carries multiple meanings or grammatical functions combined into a single form. Unlike a typical morpheme that usually represents one specific meaning or function, a portmanteau morpheme merges two or more of these into one unit. For example, in French, the word o is a portmanteau morpheme. It combines a, meaning to, and le, meaning the, into a single word. So instead of saying ale, which would be the full phrase, French uses o. Another example is in English with contractions like I'm, where I and am are combined into a single morpheme that serves the function of both the subject and the verb. This differs from your example of you, as you is not a portmanteau, but a pronoun that refers to the second person singular or plural. A portmanteau morpheme is more about merging different meanings or grammatical roles into one word.
Also in French, in Spanish. So what happens is that de el montaña becomes del montaña, meaning of the mountain. So briefly, tell me, am I correct or incorrect?
You're close, but there's a small adjustment needed. In Spanish, de and el combine to form del, just like de la montaña becomes del montaña. However, del montaña should actually be del monte if we're talking about a mountain, as monte is masculine. Montaña is feminine, so it would remain de la montaña. So you're correct in identifying that de and el merge to form
Del monte.
but just make sure to match the gender of the noun correctly.
Okay. Moving on to the next question. So, meaningful unity of words in a linguistic utterance is termed as coherence. Now, please go ahead and elaborate what this statement really wants to express.
The statement is referring to the concept of coherence in linguistics. Coherence is the quality that makes a text or an utterance meaningful and logical to the listener or reader. It's what ties together different parts of a discourse, ensuring that the ideas connect in a way that makes sense as a whole. For example, in a conversation or a written text, coherence is what helps you understand the overall message, even if not every single word or sentence is perfectly clear. It's about how the ideas fit together. If someone says, I missed the bus, I was late to work, the coherence lies in the logical connection between the two sentences. The reason the person was late is because they missed the bus. So the statement emphasizes that coherence is what gives a linguistic utterance its meaningful unity, allowing us to understand and follow the flow of ideas or events being communicated.
All right, moving on to the next question. Which of the following is not true of the aspects model? First, transformations include addition, deletion, movement, and substitution. That's correct. Second, base provides input to the deep structure. That is also correct. Meaning is contained in the surface structure. That is not correct. Deep structure goes to the surface structure through transformations. So the one that is not correct is that the meaning is contained in the surface structure itself, because meaning is contained in the deep structure. Now explain to me, base provides input to the deep structure in the aspects model. What does this really mean, or what mechanism lies behind this phenomena?
In the aspects model proposed by Noam Chomsky, the deep structure is a key concept in understanding how sentences are formed and interpreted in a language. Here's how it works. Base component. The base, or base component of the grammar, is where the deep structure is generated. This deep structure represents the core semantic meaning relationships of a sentence. Essentially, it's where the essential meaning of a sentence is laid out before any transformations happen. The base component consists of a set of rules called phrase structure rules, which define how words can be combined to form phrases and sentences. Input to deep structure. When we say that the base provides input to the deep structure, it means that the base component generates the deep structure according to these rules. The base essentially takes the basic building blocks of meaning, like subjects, objects, and predicates, and organizes them into a hierarchical structure that reflects their grammatical relationships. Transformations. Once the deep structure is generated, it undergoes a series of transformations, like addition, deletion, movement, and substitution, to produce the surface structure, which is the actual form of the sentence as we speak or write it. However, the deep structure is where the core meaning is encoded, and it serves as the foundation for the sentence. D. Surface structure. The deep structure is closely tied to meaning, while the surface structure is more about the final arrangement of words and phrases. For example, the deep structure of John is easy to please and it is easy to please John might be similar in terms of meaning, but the surface structures are different because the transformations have arranged the elements in different ways. So in summary, the statement, the base provides input to the deep structure, means that the base component of the grammar generates the deep structure, which is the underlying representation of a sentence's meaning. This deep structure then undergoes transformations to become the surface structure, which is the sentence as we actually use it.
Can you quickly can you elaborate on how to form, or how to know about the deep structure of any sentence? How is the deep structure of any sentence derived? Can you explain that in words?
To understand the deep structure of a sentence, you need to grasp its core meaning and grammatical relationships before any transformations occur. Here's a brief overview of how it is derived. 1. Identify the core meaning. Start by understanding the basic components of the sentence. Who is doing what to whom? This involves identifying the subject, predicate, and object in the sentence. 2. Apply phrase structure rules. Use phrase structure rules to organize these components into a hierarchical structure. These rules define how words and phrases are combined to form sentences. For instance, a simple sentence might be structured as subject plus verb plus object. 3. Generate the deep structure. The deep structure represents this core meaning in its most abstract form. It's a theoretical construct that shows the essential relationships between the elements of the sentence, without regard to how they are arranged in the final spoken or written form. 4. Transform to surface structure. Finally, apply transformations to the deep structure to produce the surface structure, which is the sentence as we actually use it in communication. This might involve moving elements around, adding words, or changing their forms. For example, consider the sentences, John is easy to please, and it is easy to please John. The deep structure for both sentences is similar, because they share the core meaning that John is the person who is pleased easily. The difference between them is due to different transformations applied to the same deep structure to create different surface structures.
So what would be the deep structure of the sentence "I am drinking water"? What would be the deep structure of this sentence?
The deep structure of the sentence, "I am drinking water," captures the core meaning and relationships without considering the specific surface level grammatical details. For this sentence, the deep structure would be subject, I, object, water. So the deep structure focuses on the essential elements: I, the doer, drink, the action, and water, the receiver of the action. It abstracts away from the tense and grammatical aspects present in the surface structure, such as am drinking.
Your voice got cut off. So could you please briefly explain what would be the deep structure of the sentence "I am drinking water"?
The deep structure of I am drinking water focuses on the core components: the subject, I, the action, drink, and the object, water. It abstracts away from specific grammatical details like tense and aspect. So it's essentially about the relationship between the subject, the action, and the object.
I don't have much time to waste. Could you please tell me what would be the deep structure sentence of the surface structure sentence, or which is that "I am drinking water"? So this is the surface structure sentence. Now I want to know the sentence at the deep structure.
The deep structure of I am drinking water would be something like I drink water. It captures the basic meaning without the specific tense or auxiliary verbs.
Okay, moving on to the next question. Case is a property which is associated with what of a sentence? So it is associated with the noun of a sentence. The next is linguistic competence. So linguistic competence refers to the capacity to produce and understand an infinite number of sentences, the capacity to understand, so use language in all social situations. That's communicative competence, the capacity to understand all verbal and non-verbal signs, the capacity to find mistakes. So the correct answer is the capacity to produce and understand an infinite number of sentences. So please reassure if I'm correct or incorrect. Do not take much time because I don't have much time.
You're correct. Linguistic competence is indeed the capacity to produce and understand an infinite number of sentences.
The next question is: the sentence clause distinction in generative terms is found in the sentence clause distinction in the generative terms is found in the principles and parameter theory. Now, I want you to explain what this distinction really means, like exemplify that thing, like something which gets in my head and never leaves. So go ahead and do that, and also explain how the principles and parameter theory is related to this statement.
In generative grammar, the sentence clause distinction helps us understand how different parts of sentences are structured. A sentence can be divided into clauses, which are smaller units that can act independently or as part of a larger structure. For example, in the sentence, "She went to the store because she needed milk," "she went to the store" is one clause, and "because she needed milk" is another. Each clause has its own subject and predicate. The principles and parameters theory, developed by Noam Chomsky, explains how different languages can have varying sentence structures based on a set of universal principles and language-specific parameters. The theory posits that all human languages share a common underlying structure, principles, but differ in specific ways, parameters. So, The sentence clause distinction helps us analyze and compare how clauses are structured in different languages, according to the principles and parameters that each language follows.
Now, the next question is, in the sentence, John himself cut the apple. Himself is, what is it like? It's an emphatic. So, what does the term emphatic mean? Exemplify it, and also explain this sentence. John himself cut the apple, and why is himself an emphatic?
In the sentence, John himself cut the apple, the word himself is used as an emphatic. Emphatic means adding emphasis to a particular element in the sentence, usually to stress the subject's role or to highlight that they did the action personally. In this example, John himself emphasizes that John and not someone else performed the action of cutting the apple. This emphasis shows that John did it personally, perhaps to contrast with someone else who might have been expected to do it, or to stress his direct involvement. So, himself here adds emphasis to John's role in the action, making it clear that John is the one who did the cutting, rather than suggesting it could have been done by someone else.
Now, move on to the next question. Alive, dead. Alive, dead. There is something like complementary antonym. Yes, alive, dead
It
is.
seems like you're referring to a concept or a term related to phonology or another linguistic topic, but alive, dead isn't clear. Could you provide more context or clarify what you're asking about?
So alive, dead. So complementary antonyms are something like, opposite of each other. So they two things which cannot exist in the same place. That's complementary antonym. That's complementary. Now, alive, dead. So either someone is alive or is dead. So alive, dead is an example of complementary antonym. Now go ahead and reassure if I'm correct or incorrect with my explanation, and do not take much time because I don't have any.
Yes, you're correct. Alive and dead are complementary antonyms because something cannot be both at the same time. Your explanation is accurate.
Now, in the metalingual function, language is used to discuss itself. Now, the addressee is engaged. The addressee is engaged. That's probably, I don't know, that's the expressive function. Focus on message for its own sake. That might be the poetic function. The addresser is engaged. That might be the emotive function. And language is used to discuss itself is the metalingual function for certain. So explain the other three. The addressee is directly engaged. What function does this relate to? And focus is on message for its own sake. So what does this relate to? Which function? And the addresser is engaged. That certainly is expressive, emotive, affective function. So for the two of them, focus is on message for its own sake, and the addressee is directly engaged.
You're right about the metalingual function. It involves language being used to discuss itself. For the other functions, the function where the focus is on the message for its own sake is the poetic function. This function emphasizes the form and aesthetics of the message itself. When the addressee is directly engaged, it relates to the emotive function. This function focuses on expressing the speaker's emotions and attitudes.
The addressee is directly engaged. That's the emotive function. So what about the addresser? What about if the addresser is engaged? What function implies there?
When the addresser is engaged, it relates to the expressive function. This function focuses on the speaker's emotions and personal expression rather than on the message or the addressee.
But aren't expressive, emotive, and affective functions the same, one and the same?
Expressive, emotive, and affective functions are closely related but have distinct nuances. Expressive function focuses on the speaker's emotions or attitudes. It's more about the speaker's personal feelings and self-expression. Emotive function, often used interchangeably with expressive, but specifically emphasizes the emotional state or feelings of the speaker. Affective function. This term is less commonly used, but generally refers to the way language influences emotions and moods. In essence, while they overlap, the expressive and emotive functions are more about how the speaker expresses emotions, whereas the affective function looks at how language can affect emotions overall.
All right, moving on to the next question. The referential function. The referential function engages the addressee, relates to the addressor, corresponds to the factor of context, and describes the situation, object, or mental state, and focuses on message for its own sake. So, referential function corresponds to the factor of context and describes a situation, object, or mental state. Please exemplify this. Please exemplify what this, what this means, and also do not take much time, please.
The referential function of language focuses on conveying information about the external world, such as situations, objects, or mental states. For example, in the sentence, "The cat is on the mat," the function describes a specific situation and provides information about the location of the cat. This function is concerned with the context and the factual content of the message.
Which of the following is an example of polar opposition? So the options are alive, dead, teacher, student, wet, dry, tenant, landlord. So example of polar opposition must be wet, dry. Now, could you please explain why is it so?
Polar oppositions are pairs of words that represent opposite ends of a spectrum without any middle ground. In the example of wet and dry, they are polar opposites because something can be one or the other with no intermediate state between them. For instance, something can be either completely wet or completely dry. In contrast, teacher and student or tenant landlord are not polar opposites, as they describe different roles or relationships that don't represent an absolute contrast, but rather a specific interaction.
But if that was the explanation of polar opposition, then alive, dead would also be examples of polar opposition, but they are not. They are examples of complementary opposition or complementary antonyms.
You're right. Alive and dead are complementary antonyms because they are mutually exclusive states where one must be true if the other is not. Polar opposites like wet and dry fit the broader concept of oppositional pairs, but they aren't mutually exclusive. There are varying degrees in between. So alive and dead represent a strict binary, while wet and dry allow for a range of states in between.
Okay, so there is no though there is no stage between alive and dead, whereas there are certainly intermediate stages between wet and dry, and that is the reason why wet and dry is an example of polar opposition and not complementary antonyms. Correct?
Exactly. Wet and dry allow for varying degrees of moisture, which makes them polar opposites. Alive and dead represent a strict binary with no intermediate states, making them complementary antonyms.
All right. Cool. Kal sulre lalle ave